Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria, and today, well, when I'm filming this at least, is my birthday. Yay! I know. Oh, it's hard to be excited sometimes for your birthday. It's one of those years, one of those birthdays. Although, a better birthday than last year, I will note. For those of you who've been around for a little while, I was in bed with a fever on my birthday last year because 2024 was just a day, a time, a place. But today has been a pretty chill day. I am actually at the mall because there's a Barnes & Noble at the mall. So I'm going to go there and hang out. And I don't know, walk around, enjoy a nice day. It's very nice outside right now. But I really don't know exactly what today's video will bring. We still need to talk about January's reads and February's reads, which I might do when we get home. But yeah, that's pretty much where we're at, to be honest. Hello, so I'm back home. Didn't find anything in Barnes & Noble. Honestly, I've just been feeling very uninspired when it comes to reading. So I don't know. My brain is not ready for something complex. Like I think I mentioned in my last video that I tried to read The Hobbit and it just wasn't happening for me at the moment. I think, like, just to be transparent, I'm having like serious like jaw head pain, and so it just makes like that kind of focus real hard. Very, very hard. Oh, hello pumpkins. Hello, hello, hello. So that is one challenge that I'm having currently. Also, because of that, I think I'm gonna put the Whistle Down Wishes series on pause, just because trying to force myself to read classics right now is probably going to be detrimental to me reading it all. So I think we're gonna put that on pause. I feel a sneeze coming. Yeah, we're gonna put that on pause to make our lives easier. So in January, we read 15 books totaling 5,411 pages with an average rating of 3.6, which honestly I think is pretty low for me, which I think just means that I'm reading more books. So I'm reading more books that are not like potentially books that I'm necessarily interested or thought I would be interested. But I had 1 5-star in January, and that was What Moves the Dead, which I read for Winterween and had a whole thing on that. So if you want in-depth on that, I read that and The Fall of the House of Usher because that's what T. Kingfisher's book is based off of. But I gave this book 5 stars. It was a novella. It was short. It was interesting. I really, really enjoyed it. So What Moves the Dead was my top book in January. The other 2 books that we had on here were Pink Child by Erin A. Craig, which I started in December, but the audiobook I picked up from the library and I didn't finish it in time, so I ended up finishing it in January, and I gave that book 4.25 stars. I enjoyed it. I thought that the ending of it was rushed because we had so much setup to where we got to the 3rd act and it just felt really rushed to me, and honestly I was interested in seeing that story be built up a little bit more than it was. So I didn't think that the ending gave me as much satisfaction as it could have. So that's why I gave it 4.25, because I really did enjoy the lore. I think Aaron A. Craig does a great job of taking fairy tales and making interesting... Sorry, there was like a sound that sounded weird from the construction, making an interesting story out of it. So really like that one. Other book I gave 4.25 stars was My Feral Romance by Tessania, which is the second book in Fae, Flings, and Corset Strings, which is a Victorian-esque romance series, but it's based in this country that is like a fae country. And we actually start off with the first book, which I read 2 in January and gave 4 stars, and that was a Rivalry of Hearts. And this book is following Edwina and William, who are both authors, and they are on a competitive tour to see who is going to get the money and book deal from this like book signing tour throughout this fae country, fae realm. So Edwina is a human and William is fae, and it's got, so it's giving, you know, it's enemies to lovers. There is some Pride and Prejudice influences here, but these are very much like, they're adult, they put them as adult fantasy rom-com, and I think that is a very accurate description of this series in general, because there's definitely the romance, like I wouldn't call it a romantasy because it's not high stakes. These are not high stakes. It is a romance novel. Like I would put this as romance over fantasy, and I don't mean that in just that there's spicy scenes, but like it is written like a romance novel. So it follows the same beats, and we do have a lot of fantasy elements. So it's like a romance novel written in a fantasy world, which it to me is different than a romantasy, because I do think that romantasies mimic more high fantasies, high stakes, and this is very low stakes. Like I know, for example, like I know The Spell Shop ended on romantasy, and this is probably the next book that I'm going to read. It's downstairs on my nightstand. That's why I just have the book sleeve cover. But I know this was put in romantasy. I know I heard a lot of people say they thought it was more like cozy fantasy. I would not say this is cozy fantasy either. These are definitely romance books. I like that the first one we have 2 authors, and they basically create a bet of like who can sleep with the most people on this tour, and whoever does gets the contract. And obviously these 2 authors fall in love and blah blah blah. So that was super fun. But the second one follows 2 characters that we met in the first book, so very much following that romance novel setup where it's a companion novel, and I really enjoyed My Feral Romance more. I liked both of the characters more. It's a friends to lovers, co-workers to lovers kind of situation, and I just, yeah, I loved the 2 characters in this book. I liked their dynamic. So it's Daphne and Monty, and in the first book we meet Monty, like I said, and Daphne, and I enjoyed their characters a lot in the first book. In fact, like the first time I met Monty, I was like, oh, I wish he was the romantic interest, because I'm more interested in his story than I am in William's. But we get their story. They're super cute. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I don't know, I'm up in the air about if I'm looking forward to the third one, because the person that they chose for the next two books. We just met the male main character, but the female main character, I'm not sure how I feel about. I didn't love her in this book, so we will see. I'll probably still read it because they're a very easy read. They're really fun. So had quite a few 4 stars. Like I mentioned, I did read The Fall of the House of Usher. I gave it 4 stars. It was good. I think, I really do think what T. Kingfisher did with this story was an improvement on The Fall of the House of Usher. I can definitely see where she pulled the inspo from, and I enjoyed it more than The Fall of the House of Usher, but like it was also an interesting read. Next, another book that we read for Winterween was The Witchwood Knot by Olivia Atwater. I read that and liked it a lot. Kind of a similar theme, kind of a similar vibe to, not a similar vibe, because I would definitely say this one is more fantasy and darker, higher stakes than the Fae-flings and corsets, but like similar vibes here. We've got Victorian setting with Fae, and we have a creepy house, which kind of goes in with The Fall of the House of Usher, as well as like very much January was a theme. It was a time. This is the second series in this world. The first series I plan on reading this year as well, and it's set in Regency period, but this one's set in Victorian period, and we are actually following children that we met in the first 3 novels. So I don't know them as children, so it's gonna be interesting to go back and read. I think the first one is Half a Soul, which again is a Regency fairy tale novel. But it was a good time. I'm definitely gonna pick up the next one in the series, and like I said, I do intend to read the Regency ones as well. I've got 2 more 4 stars, 3 more 4 stars in January. So I did read The Tainted Cup. I also read that for Winterween, and although I get this 4 stars, I'm not gonna really talk about this book. Like, I feel like everyone talked about it ad nauseum, but it is like a fantasy Sherlock Holmes book where our main character is basically, everybody is like augmented in this world, and our main character is augmented to work with this detective, and some strange murders start happening, and they get put on the case and get involved with it and kind of unravel something very interesting that's going on. I will say I felt like it dragged a little bit for me. I wanted more. I wanted to like it more than I did. I do think the magic system is very cool, which everyone talks about. So a lot of it's like plant-based, and it's interesting. I definitely will read the next one in the series because it was interesting enough. I just didn't love it as much as other people did. Okay, 2 more 4 stars. The first one was the first book I read in January, finished in January realistically, and that was The Village Library Demon Hunting Society by C.M. Wagner. This was a fun little story where we have a librarian who basically is just always solving these murders, but starts to, after somebody close to her is murdered and things seem to go a little haywire, starts to think that perhaps the life she's been living is a little stranger than just she had thought. Like, things seem to be going awry, and I think we are kind of led to first question whether those things are happening, but whether or not something magical, mystical is going on that's actually turning this town into like a murder mystery book. And so it was a fun little romp. I enjoy an older female protagonist, so I thought that was really fun. I would definitely read the next one. I did listen to it on audiobook, and yeah, I had a good little time. The last one was The New Year by Julie Zhe, And that was actually a German translated book that I read for my book club, which I have not updated for March. But I did read that because it does take place on the new year. And it was an interesting read. I didn't know how I was going to feel about it when I first started reading it because it was kind of all over the place. But it is a fiction, realistic fiction where we're in the modern world. There's no like fantasy elements or anything like that. But basically, this guy goes on a bike ride on New Year's Day and is kind of like playing out this holiday that he's been on. And yeah, it goes in a very different direction than you think it is going to. Very different direction. Super interesting. I actually would really recommend reading it because it's just like, it'll surprise you. Definitely will surprise you. Next, we have one 3.5 star, and this was As Old as Time by Liz Braswell. This was the second book that we read to go along with the Once Upon a Watch Long that Gavin's doing. Unfortunately, I haven't been caught up on Once Upon a Time in a while, so I didn't even read So This Is Love for this past month, but did like As Old as Time better than the Snow White one that we read first. I enjoyed this one more. I thought the lore that they gave, the world that Belle lived in, and how the prince got cursed and all that kind of stuff, and like gave her mom and her dad some more interesting backstory. So I did really like that element. I thought it added something to the story, which I feel like if we're going to do these, like adding something more to the story really makes for a good time. 2 3 stars. The first one was The Rebound by Catherine Walsh, which is a, Catherine Walsh writes romance novels. The ones that I've read have been taken place in Ireland. Typically the person is like going back to Ireland, or they know somebody who's in Ireland, and The Rebound follows the Rebound, our main character. She essentially loses her job, loses her fiance, and is going home to stay with her sister while she figures life out, but she hasn't told anybody what's going on. They know she's lost her job, but they don't know that her fiance dumped her. And when she gets there, she runs into this guy who she thinks really hot and ends up being like kind of her quirky childhood friend, neighbor, who she hadn't talked to in a long time. And it's a lot of miscommunication. I didn't like this book as much as the other ones I read from her. I read Snowed In, which is the second book in like a holiday romance series that she's written, because B mentioned that she really liked it. So I read it and I really enjoyed Snowed In. And then I also read One Night Only. I thought, when did I read that one? I thought I read that one. Did I read that one last year? I guess I read that one last year too. No, I read that one in January. Why isn't it on my list? Well, oh no, it is. I missed another 3 stars. So I read The Holiday. I read Snowed In, really liked it. Decided to pick up some of her other books because they were on KU. The Rebound, I don't know. I didn't really connect with like the characters as much as Snowed In. I just thought that their miscommunication was super annoying. And then One Night Only, we have a character who sleeps with this guy and she like kicks him out. She only does one night stands and finds out he's the rude, cut me off. Finds out that he's the brother of her best friend's fiance. So when she goes to Ireland, she's wrapped up with him again. And yeah, it was cute. They were both cute. They were both fine. But they just didn't hit as Snowed In. I didn't think the chemistry between those two characters were as fun as Snowed In. The other 3 star we have is The Hitchcock Hotel, which I also read for Winterween. This was basically about this guy, Alfred, who he opens up a Hitchcock themed hotel and invites his college friends to stay the weekend. We get this idea that he is trying to get revenge, or he's trying to get revenge on these people. We don't really know for what. And then we're trying to figure that out and kind of like go and parse through their history and figure out why they stopped talking to him and kind of what was going on. And we slowly work our way through that. It was fine. It was interesting. It was kind of slow. I was like, I don't really, we're doing so much that like, once we finally got to what was going on, I was like, oh geez, thank God. Like, wrap it up. It was just kind of got to that wrap it up. Our final 2 books in January, we have my 2 stars. The first one was Little Women. I have a whole video on that, so you can check that out. And it wasn't for me, is all I'm gonna say for me. And then the other one was Thief, Liar, Lady, which was a Cinderella retelling. And this is what I was saying, like, sometimes retellings are really hit or miss for me, right? Because the 13th Child I really liked, but then again, I don't really know that fairy tale, and it's a bit darker. Thief, Liar, Lady was just doing so much. We were doing so much, and I just couldn't get behind it. I just really didn't like that story. So yeah, it wasn't for me. Okay, so that was January. What a ride. Now February, like I said, a lot shorter. So kind of wrapping it up. So, yeah, so in February, technically I read 3. I finished 3 books in February. The first book I read, I gave 3.5 stars, and that was She Doesn't Have a Clue. I have an entire video of me reading this book and trying out a book box called Once Upon a Book Club that actually has items that correspond with the story, and you get to certain pages and you open these items. It was a super fun experience. Feel free to check it out. The next book I read was the novella that Abby Jimenez put out for February, and that's The Fall Risk. And essentially we have 2 main characters who are neighbors, and a construction mishap accidentally takes out their stairs, so they can't really get down from their apartment for the long weekend, and they end up hanging out, forming a bond. Our female main character has a stalker, and so she's very much a recluse at this point, and it is about how, you know, her and getting to experience like connecting with people again kind of improves, gives her like the confidence to take on things. So it was a cute little romance. I gave it 4 stars. Very much an Abby Jimenez book where we have 2 main characters who are a lot of fun and have a cute little romance in the middle of some pretty traumatic things. So very much an Abby Jimenez book, but it was only 82 pages. I had a really good time. It was fun reading it. The next book that I read, finally, was the 5th book in the Veronica Speedwell series, which is A Murderous Relation. I gave this book 4 stars, and I think I really liked A Dangerous Collaboration because it was like very atmospheric. This one, we're back in London. We have like the backdrop of Jack the Ripper, and we also have like a scandal involving the Crown Prince where Veronica and Stoker get asked to help with it. Yeah, I think because the atmosphere of the last one I really enjoyed, and we also had like some growing tensions between Veronica and Stoker that I was like really excited we were finally getting to. This, we do have that in the end of them kind of figuring out from that fallout where they're going to go from there. But I'm curious to see what the next book is about. I think I'm going to like the next book more than I liked this one, just from vibes. I believe my intrepid viewers brings us to the final book that I've read, period, I guess, that I've finished in the year of the Lord 2025, and that is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I had mentioned that I did want to talk about this one with y'all because I know this one was really popular. I had mentioned that Katie Coulson from Katie Coulson had it in her BookTuber's Top Books of 2024. I will again link that video down below because she does amazing work with this, and it's like such a labor of love, and I'm always so impressed by it. So just want to shout her out again. But this was one of the ones that are on here, and I've been seeing this one and wanted to pick it up, and I've heard really good things. And so I picked this up right after I finished A Murderous Relation. And like I mentioned, I read this like near the tail end of February, and then barely, like I had like 30 pages left and finished that in the very beginning of March. So it wasn't going to show up in my February numbers and, you know, stats. I gave this one in my head 4 stars. Yeah. I gave this one in my head 4 stars. And now I'm giving it on Storygraph 4 stars. So I think the magic system is interesting. It was very different than what I thought it was going to be. I don't know. When I read the synopsis of this book, I don't know why I thought that she was going on like a journey, like a Lord of the Rings-esque journey somewhere. I don't know where I picked that up. Quest. See, it says quest. We got highwayman. Like, if you read the description, I thought I was getting like characters wandering the forest to do this thing. That's what I thought we were doing. That is not what we're doing. This is very much kind of, again, in a vein of like books that I've been reading. We have like that historical element, that royalty element, nobility kind of backdrop in this fantasy world, and playing a bit of politics in this fantasy world whilst there are stakes that really need to be resolved in order to save Blunder, which is the land of which our main character lives in. So we're following Elspeth. She is a girl, she's like 19, I believe, or something like that, 20-something? 20-something. She's in her late 20s. But she was touched by, there's like this curse, sickness, that gives, like this infection that gives people in this world powers, but these powers eventually deteriorate them because it's the idea that, you know, all magic has a cost. So the king of Blunder, the kings of Blunder have a pretty strict policy on eliminating anybody who's infected, imprisoning them, saying they're a danger to society. So Elspeth, she is someone whose family protected her. Well, her aunt's family protected her. So she's essentially, for the majority of her life, grown up with her aunt and her uncle and her cousins. And her infection hasn't really manifested anything. So they don't really think she has powers. But she does have this voice in her in her head, who she calls a nightmare. And has, you know, she's kind of gotten used to them in her head. And she ends up being thrust back into the world of her father, because her father is more of a high-ranking noble than her aunt and uncle are. And so her father remarried after her mother died, so he has a new family, but essentially there is this like equinox thing they do at the castle, and she goes to this, and she hasn't gone in a long time. And she meets some characters that kind of change the trajectory of her pretty quiet existence that she's been living. I'm trying to keep it as vague as possible as to not ruin it. But like I said, a lot more like fake dating, romance, political intrigue kind of stuff going on than I thought when I read the synopsis, the description of the story. But I liked her kind of attraction with the king's nephew, stuff like that. What I had a hard time with here is, so a big part of Elsbeth's arc here in the first book is trying to figure out who exactly, like the nightmare has secrets, right? And trying to figure what those secrets are. And here's where I had a problem with the story and became annoyed with the story. I became annoyed with the story because the nightmare secrets were so obvious from the get-go. Like, I mean, 2 + 2 = 4. Like, this girl has read, so there's this whole magic system about cards, right? They're called Providence cards in the thing, and they're trying to collect them and everything like that. So there's this whole like fairy tale book basically about Blunder, this fog that causes the infection, and the cards. And according to Elsbeth, she has read this book front to back, multiple times over the years. Like, really knows this book in and out. And this nightmare likes to recite things from this book as well. So like, she's hearing these words all the freaking time. And she cannot figure it out. That is all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say. If anybody else felt the same way, because I really hate that with characters. Like, I really hate when we do that with authors, where if I'm a reader and I can figure it out, and I don't feel like this was a situation where we had like an unreliable narrator, or that there were character switches where we were really getting information that this character didn't have. That was not what was going on in this book, because that I'm fine with. Like, if I'm getting information that the character who's trying to solve something doesn't have, then obviously I'm gonna have a better chance of figuring out what's going on before the character. Fine. But I didn't need additional information to figure out what was going on. She, our main character, Elsbeth, really laid it out very early on. The bare minimum details that you need to figure out the nightmare secrets. I hate that. I hate that. Like, I want competent characters, and she should have been more competent. Like, she wasn't incompetent in a lot of ways, but like was very blinded by this, and it drove me nuts to the point where like I'm questioning my 4 stars because it irritated the hell out of me. She kept coming up, she kept asking him about it all through this damn book, and I'm like, oh my god, you've literally said 50 things that should have led you right to it. Should have just, bam, here we are. Like, my girl, you've answered your own question 1,000,001 times. And when she does figure it out, the Nightmare Queen's like, you had all the information. And I'm like, yes, she did. She had all the information for a hot minute. Oh, I couldn't. It drove me nuts. So that was my question. And that is where I want to leave this wrap up, because I needed to talk to somebody about it. And you are the people who I talked to about it. So I needed someone to tell me, did this plot point, if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. Did it drive you as insane as it did me? Because, oh man, took so long. So unbearably long. It's a big note for me. That being said, I will read the next book where we left off. I do want to see what will happen. And this plot point is no longer going to exist there. So hopefully it won't annoy me. So that will solve that problem. The biggest problem that I had with the first book in this series. I know the second one's already out. I don't know how many are going to be in this series. But I don't know if she said. But again, this is another one where I had a good time. I liked it. I don't know if I get the hype. Like, it was good. It was good. It was cool. But I don't know if it was like my fave. Clearly it wasn't, because I had an issue with that. Maybe the next one will really change that around for me, because that plot point won't be in existence. So we shall see. Oh, Pumpkin is looking for pets. That's my sign. So anyway, yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up here. That was a lot of books to go over. Again, I'm not sure what our reading's gonna look like this coming month. I'm not gonna be doing TBRs for the time being. We're just gonna be seeing what we can read. Like I said, I am trying, I think The Spell Shop is gonna be the next book on my list. I'm currently reading a book I picked up from the library, but I'm really not enjoying it, so I think I'm just gonna DNF it and send it back so somebody else can read it. I just don't like the writing. It's not for me. So might just do that. But yeah, I'm not quite sure what our plans are for March, what our videos are going to be, kind of just taking it as it comes at the moment. But I do have some crafts and like some fun things I want to do, so we'll see. We'll see what we're doing, what we're reading. If you have any suggestions for me of some books that you think like are good but like aren't too labor intensive for the brain, let me know down below. Would love to hear them. I do have quite a few on my shelf that I can pick up and read, so we'll see. But thank you so much for watching. If you are new to my channel and want to stick around, feel free to subscribe. I upload every Friday and sometime on Sundays, but probably just Fridays for right now as we are surviving. But I hope y'all are doing well. I hope 2025 is not kicking your butt too much. And of course, until next time, I hope you read a good book. I hope you find some joy, and most importantly, I hope you do something to make the world a better place, and I will see you in my next one. Time to go pet my cat. Bye!